Hello and welcome back to another video. Today here again on Forza Horizon 5 to take a look at another brand new addition to the Forza series, which is this 2005 Mitsubishi No. 1 Sierra Enterprises Lancer Evolution Time Attack. As usual, to unlock this new vehicle, all we have to do is complete 20 points of this week's festival playlist, which is the winter season, which I have done by doing the trial, one of the championships, the photo challenge, and the 4 monthly rivals at the beginning of the series. Also, note how ridiculously long the name of the car is. It actually runs into my credits. It overlaps it. Wow. The first couple of things I noticed about this Time Attack EVO were the fact it only seemed to have half a driver's side window, and that somehow they had managed to write Sierra backwards on both sides of the car. This was actually the car I was most looking forward to unlocking in this series, and I say was because despite liking how it drove in monthly rivals, I really didn't enjoy the experience of driving it in its stock configuration around my Event Lab Island circuit once I had unlocked it. The only thing longer than its name, it appeared, was the time the turbo took to spool up. It's honestly worthy of a 1980s Porsche 911, giving you all 949 horsepower at once from its 2¼ litre engine and propelling you straight into whatever solid object happens to be in front of you at the time. Given it's made by Sierra Industries and has input from Cosworth, I feel like it would have made much more sense to simply call this thing the Sierra Cosworth. Being an EVO, it is of course all-wheel drive, but also has limitless downforces, which is great, but it does suffer from more understeer than an Audi from the early 2000s, and on those the engines were literally strapped to the front bumper. This may also have something to do with its weight though. Yes, despite the amount of carbon fibre everything on this car, it weighs 1,256 kilos, which honestly to me sounds like more than it should be on something this extreme that's chasing lap times and performance like a Time Attack car is. Overall then, it starts with a rating of S2 967 here in Horizon 5. So being a Time Attack car is essentially a race car, which makes sense with the theme of this update, but it does mean it only has the sort of race car livery that it comes with, which is kind of cool because that bit that looks black is in fact carbon fibre, although it does look incredible just painting the whole thing black. How aggressive and mean does that look? It's very tempting, but I think I'm going to keep the livery. And being a race car, it's a similar story in the upgrade shop. There really aren't that many options. In conversion, all you have is a rear-wheel drive swap, or, in other words, making the car worse swap. You can't increase power either. All you can do is add a turbo with anti-lag, so it's the same power output, it just changes the power and torque curves slightly, which I think does give a slight advantage from people's testing before, but it's negligible. Rather interestingly, it's not on race brakes from standard, which I find slightly odd, but it is on race suspension. There are, though, options for off-road suspension, so it might be interesting to see if anyone shares any off-road tunes for this, although they're going to be an S2, so they're probably of very little interest to me. And there's also drift suspension. Not really sure why you'd want to do that with this, but it's there if you want to. And then there is some transmission upgrades, but it's already a race transmission, so all they do is change your gear number, and you can put a rally and drift differential in. You can, of course, also change your tyres, but nothing really brings the PI down enough for it to ever drop into S1, and S2 is, well, not terribly exciting to me. So yeah, it's kind of not a lot you can do with customization and painting or upgrades on this thing. It doesn't launch now I've tuned the gears. So although it's not something I would usually enjoy, I did go in search of some S2 class tunes for this thing, because that's all we can really do with it at all. But I then discovered you can't actually get it to the top of S2, or at least none of the tunes I saw out there were, so I kind of find it unlikely that it's possible. So instead what we did is, well, I equipped mine with a turbo with anti-lag to give it a slight advantage, I hoped. We tuned the gears a little bit, and we headed into Horizon Open with it exactly as it was. And, well, rather predictably, it was the same as driving it stock, because not much had really been changed with it. It still had turbo lag, although not as bad with the anti-lag equipped. But the main problem was that the horrendous understeer was still there, so it just ploughed out wide everywhere, and wasn't all that fun to drive. But anyway, we did a couple of online adventures in this thing, to be sure, but yeah, it really wasn't doing terribly well, especially with the Valkyries and things of this world being much faster. I think maybe once some of the tuners of the Forza universe get hold of this thing, other types of fish are available, they may be able to tune out some of the understeer and things like that and make it a bit more pleasant to drive, but I don't think it's ever going to be particularly competitive, to be honest. So at this point I didn't really know what else I could try with the Time Attack EVO. It wasn't particularly pleasant to drive stock so far. Upgraded it wasn't much better and wasn't particularly competitive. So instead what I did, like I did with the McLaren Artura a few weeks ago, although that was an upgraded version of that car, I took it for a run up the Vulcan hill climb, just to see what time it would get on a sort of one-shot attempt up the volcano. And yes, it felt quite a lot better to drive up here, actually. It's kind of more intuitive, so it very much depends what sort of track you're driving it on, whether it's enjoyable or not, this car. I still don't think, though, it's going to be particularly useful for anything. Yes, it did beat that McLaren Artura's time of 240.883 by over 4 seconds, setting a time of 235.014, but it was quite substantially higher PI than that car. The upgrades I had on that only took it to 923, where of course this was sitting at 967, so it doesn't really tell you much about the car. That then is going to be all for a very first look at this ridiculously long-named Time Attack car that from now on I'm just going to call the Sierra Cosworth because it's simpler and shorter. So stock, it's kind of hit and miss whether it's enjoyable to drive, very much depends on where you're driving it, but it does suffer from understeer and horrendous turbo lag. Upgraded, you can put anti-lag on it, which solves the turbo lag a little bit. You can tune the gears and stuff, which helps a bit with racing at different circuits. But it can't get to the top of S2 class, can't see what it's going to be particularly competitive for. I did though quite enjoy taking it up the hill climb, but apart from that, I can't see what I'm going to do with this thing, so I'm very likely to never drive it again, which is a bit of a shame because I was kind of looking forward to unlocking it. Anyway, do let me know your thoughts on this brand new addition to Forza Horizon 5, but for today's video that is going to be all, so thank you very much for watching, and I will be back with the next one very soon.